Worthless wretches, your dead mother's cursed blood. The words sliced through Windsor Castle's chamber like shattered glass. Queen Victoria's voice, usually honeyed before courtiers, now dripped with venom. The echo bounced off marble walls that had witnessed centuries of history, but never such cruelty cloaked in silk and crown. Worthless wretches, your dead mother's cursed blood. She repeated it, her face contorted into something monstrous. The woman who smiled for Parliament, who kissed those same children before nobility, that woman had vanished. You know that sinking feeling when you witness injustice but feel powerless to stop it? That helpless rage burning in your chest. Hold that feeling, because what's about to unfold will test every ounce of courage imaginable. Autumn 1842 had painted Windsor Castle in golden light. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen waterfalls, casting rainbows across Persian rugs. The scent of lavender and roses created refined opulence. But in this moment, splendor meant nothing. In the Queen's private wing, far from public chambers, 3 small figures knelt on cold stone. Princess Eleanor, 13, tear-streaked. Prince Charles, 11, shoulders shaking. Little Princess Anne, 8, hands clasped as if in prayer. Queen Victoria towered above them, afternoon sun creating a halo around her silhouette, an angel of wrath. In her right hand, an ebony cane. Her emerald gown rustled like whispers of doom. "Your father is at Parliament," she hissed, blue eyes cold as winter frost. "Playing king while I deal with you ungrateful creatures." She raised the cane. "Did you think I wouldn't discover your attempts to turn the servants against me? We've all met people who wear masks, haven't we? People who show one face to the world and another behind closed doors. Victoria, born Catherine Blackwood, had perfected this art to terrifying levels. Through calculated beauty and ruthless ambition, she'd married an elderly duke, who conveniently died within 2 years, then secured Henry as her second conquest. She wore her crown as if born to it, pearls from Henry's first wife around her neck, a detail that particularly pleased her. Around her stood her ladies-in-waiting like ravens, Lady Pemberton mirroring her cruelty, Mrs. Ashworth tittering nervously, Miss Hartley too frightened to object. "The king spoils you," Victoria continued, pacing like a general before defeated soldiers. "He sees you as treasures. But I see what you truly are, reminders of her. That simpering, weak woman who held his heart." She spat the words. "Well, she's dead, and I am queen now. This is my castle." The cane came down. Not hard enough to leave visible marks. Victoria was too clever for that. But hard enough to hurt, to humiliate, to remind them of their powerlessness. The sharp crack echoed, followed by young Anne's whimper, quickly stifled because crying only made it worse. But someone else heard that sound. Hidden behind a marble column, old Margaret pressed a trembling hand to her mouth. The chambermaid, 67, white hair, bent back from 4 decades of service, had returned for forgotten tea service. Now she stood frozen with horror. If you've ever witnessed abuse and felt paralyzed by fear, you understand Margaret's terror. She had served Windsor since 17, helped deliver Eleanor, rocked Charles through fevers, taught Anne to curtsy. These children weren't duties, they were beloved. Now she understood why their laughter had faded, why Eleanor's dresses hung loose, why Charles flinched, why Anne barely spoke. "Next time," Victoria's voice dripped poisoned honey, "I won't be so gentle. One word to your father and I will have you sent to Scottish dungeons. Do you know what they smell like in winter? Damp, rot, despair. You'll share chambers with rats and dinner with maggots. Is that what you want?" "No, Your Majesty," Eleanor whispered. Louder. "No, Your Majesty." All 3 chorused, voices cracking with terror. As the children filed out, heads bowed, Margaret pressed deeper into shadows. Her mind raced, her heart pounded. She had witnessed the unthinkable. But what could a simple chambermaid do against a queen? The answer came as the children passed her hiding spot. She saw the purple bruise forming on Charles's arm, carefully hidden. Eleanor's hollow eyes, devoid of spark. Anne's trembling lip, bitten raw from holding back screams. Margaret thought of her own daughter, dead these 20 years from fever. She thought of the promise she'd made to the late Queen Catherine on her deathbed. "Watch over my babies, Margaret. Promise me." She had promised, and promises mattered, even when they seemed impossible to keep. That evening, King Henry of Northumbria returned early from Parliament. In his carriage lay white lilies, Catherine's favourite, collected from her memorial garden. At 39, Henry was impressive, tall, broad-shouldered, dark hair silvering at temples. Tonight his brown eyes reflected anticipation of seeing his children. "Home early, Your Majesty?" his driver noted. "Indeed. I thought I'd surprise the children with dinner. Victoria has been so wonderful with them." Catherine's loss still ached, but Victoria had seemed like a gift in his grief. The court adored her. The children seemed quieter, yes, but that was natural. Growing up, how many times have we convinced ourselves everything is fine when we sense something is wrong? Henry was about to discover the cost of that willful blindness. If this story has already moved you in these opening moments, let us know in the comments what city and country you're watching from, and leave your like so we can keep sharing stories that touch hearts around the world. Henry stepped from the carriage, lilies cradled in his arms, and strode toward the golden doors. The evening air smelled of approaching autumn, wood smoke, damp leaves, the promise of change. He never made it through those doors. "Your Majesty!" The whisper came urgent and desperate. "Your Majesty, please." Henry turned to find old Margaret emerging from shadows, her face pale, hands wringing her apron. In all his years knowing her, he'd never seen Margaret frightened. "Margaret? What's wrong? Are the children ill? Your Majesty, you must listen." She glanced around frantically, pulling him behind the columns. "You must not let the Queen know you're here yet. You must see something first. Please, before you go inside, you must understand." "Understand what?" Henry's brow furrowed. "Margaret, you're frightening me." "Every time you leave," Margaret whispered, tears streaming, "every single time you leave for Parliament, for travels, for meetings. She hurts them, Your Majesty, the children, your babies. She beats them, she terrorizes them, she threatens them with dungeons if they ever tell you. They live in fear every moment you're gone." The lilies fell from Henry's hands, petals scattering like snow. For a long moment he couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. "Victoria, his Victoria." "No," he managed, voice hollow. "That's impossible. You must be mistaken. I've seen—" "They wrote to you, dozens of them, begging for help. She intercepts everyone. I found them hidden in her chambers." Henry's hands trembled as he took the papers. In fading light, he recognized his children's handwriting. His vision blurred. "Eleanor's arm hurts where—" "Papa, I tried to be brave, but she said Mother was weak. Daddy, why doesn't she love us? Please, please." One letter showed a traced hand with marks indicating bruises. "There's more," Margaret continued. "Come with me, quietly." Like a man in a nightmare, Henry followed her through servants' passages, emerging onto a balcony overlooking the Queen's wing. Margaret pointed to a window. "Watch." They didn't have to wait long. Through the window, Henry saw his children entering for evening lessons, Eleanor holding Anne's hand protectively, Charles with hunched shoulders, moving like prisoners. Then Victoria entered. Together, we're about to witness the moment that shatters everything, when masks fall away and truth stands naked and terrible. The transformation shattered something fundamental in Henry's soul. The woman he knew evaporated. Without witnesses, she showed her true face. "Stand straight!" she snapped at Charles. "Must you slouch like a peasant?" "Yes, Your Majesty," Charles whispered, straightening despite fear. "So proper. Yet behind my back you plot against me?" "We haven't told anyone," Eleanor burst out, shielding her siblings. "We promised." "Silence!" The cane descended. "You speak when I give permission." Henry watched as the cane came down, watched Eleanor wince but refused to cry, watched Charles wrap his arms around Anne, absorbing blows meant for her, watched his baby girl's silent tears. If you're a parent watching this, imagine discovering your children have been suffering while you remained oblivious. That crushing guilt, that rage. Henry felt it all at once. The king who had commanded armies stood powerless, tears streaming, as his children suffered mere feet away. "Enough," he choked out. "I've seen." But Margaret gripped his arm tighter. "One more thing, the worst part." She pulled out a small leather journal. "Read her true thoughts." By dim light, Henry read his wife's private words. Every time Eleanor grew quiet, every time Charles flinched, every time Anne clung to him, whispering, "Don't go, Papa," he'd been a blind fool who'd invited a viper into his nest. "What do I do?" he whispered. "She's the queen. The court adores her." "You have proof now." Margaret's hand covered his. "You have the letters, my testimony, your own eyes, and something more important, you have the truth. You're the king." She squeezed his hand. "More importantly, you're their father. Will you let fear silence you the way your children have been silenced? Or will you roar?" Those of us who have had to choose between comfort and what's right know how heavy that moment feels. Henry looked at the scattered lilies crushed beneath his boots. Catherine had made him promise. "Take care of our babies." He had promised. He had failed. But failure didn't have to be permanent. "I will roar," he said quietly, voice steel wrapped in silk. "Injustice. Margaret, tell the children to stay in their chambers, no matter what they hear. Tell them," his voice broke, "tell them Papa knows. Tell them Papa is sorry. Tell them everything is about to change." As Margaret hurried away, Henry descended from the balcony, moving through Windsor's corridors with new eyes. The music room where Victoria forced Eleanor to practice until her fingers bled. The library where Charles had been locked overnight for spilling ink. The garden where Anne stood in winter rain for crying, all of it hidden behind smiles and lies and his own willful blindness. He reached the Queen's wing just as she emerged, having dismissed the children. She'd changed into elegant sapphire blue, hair in perfect ringlets, smile bright and false. "Henry! Darling, you're home early!" She moved to embrace him. "What a wonderful surprise!" "Don't!" The single word stopped her mid-step. "Don't you dare speak of my children with that mouth that has said such vile things to them." Victoria's smile flickered, but held. "I don't understand." For just a moment, genuine fear flashed across her face. Then she pivoted. Her expression melted into wounded confusion. "Henry, someone has been telling you lies. The servants, perhaps." "I have letters." He held up his children's pleas. "Written in my children's hands, intercepted by you, describing in detail what you've done." Victoria's eyes flickered to the papers. The performance shifted, now to righteous indignation. If the children have been writing such things, it's because they resent discipline. You spoil them, Henry. "I have Margaret's testimony." Henry's voice grew colder. "I have your own journal, describing my children as obstacles to be removed. And I have my own eyes, Catherine. I watched you through the window 20 minutes ago, striking them, terrorizing them." The mask shattered. Victoria's face twisted into something ugly and desperate. She abandoned pretense, lunging for seduction. Her voice turned honey-sweet, body language shifting into calculated allure. "Henry, my love, you must understand. The stress of being queen, of living up to Catherine's memory, it's been so difficult." Tears appeared on command. "Sometimes I lose my temper, yes, but it's because I want them perfect for you. Everything I do is for you. You love my crown." Henry stepped back, disgust clear. "You love my wealth, my power, my position, but love, you don't comprehend the word. Real love doesn't strike children in secret. Real love doesn't terrorize the innocent. You can't prove any of this." Victoria's voice rose, desperation replacing seduction. It's the word of servants against their queen. The court will believe their king." Henry's voice resonated with authority. "And I will show them every letter, every bruise, every piece of evidence. But honestly, Catherine, I don't care what they believe, because you're done. Here now, tonight, you're finished. If this story is already touching your heart, leave a comment telling us where you're watching from, and hit that like button so we can continue sharing these powerful stories with you. You need me!" She was shouting now, all pretense gone. "You can't just cast aside a queen." "The scandal! My reputation?" Henry laughed, bitter and broken. "I'd rather be known as the fool who was deceived than the coward who knew and did nothing. I'd rather face scandal than see my children suffer one more moment under your reign of terror." Unbeknownst to them, 3 small figures huddled on the staircase beyond the throne room doors. Margaret had tried to keep them in their chambers, but Eleanor insisted they needed to know. So they listened, hardly daring to breathe. "He knows," Charles whispered, wonder and disbelief in his voice. "Papa knows. Papa actually knows." "Will he believe us?" Anne's voice quavered. Eleanor squeezed her sibling's hands. Tears streamed down her face, but for the first time in months, they weren't tears of fear. "Listen. Just listen." Inside, Henry had moved to the windows overlooking Windsor's grounds. He spoke without looking at Victoria, voice carrying absolute resolution. "Tomorrow at dawn a carriage will take you to Blackwood Manor. You will live there under watch. You will never return to Windsor. You will never contact my children. You will never again use the title of Queen. The marriage will be annulled on grounds of fraud and cruelty." "You can't!" Victoria shrieked. "I'm your wife. You are nothing." The roar erupted from Henry, primal, a father's protective fury finally unleashed. It echoed through Windsor like thunder, rattling windows, making chandeliers tremble. "You are nothing to me, nothing to them, nothing but a cruel, calculating predator who preyed upon my grief. You are banished from my sight, from my home, from my life." The silence that followed was profound. On the staircase, 3 children wept, this time in relief, in vindication, in the overwhelming rush of finally being believed. What does justice sound like? Sometimes it's a father's roar, echoing through castle halls. Sometimes it's children's tears of relief. Sometimes it's silence after a storm. Victoria stood frozen, her world crumbling. The crown she'd schemed for, the power she'd craved, the security she'd thought unassailable, all vanishing like morning mist. "Guards!" Henry commanded. 2 royal guards entered immediately, stationed outside by Margaret, waiting for this moment. "Escort the former queen to her chambers. She is to pack only personal belongings, nothing that belongs to this castle. At dawn, she departs." As Victoria was led away, face contorted in rage, screams fading down the corridor, Henry finally collapsed into the throne. His hands covered his face, shoulders shaking with sobs. Guilt, relief, rage and sorrow warred within him. "Your Majesty," Margaret's gentle voice came from the doorway. "The children are just outside. They heard everything. Send them in." Henry wiped his eyes roughly. "Please, Margaret. Send them in." 3 children entered hesitantly, as if stepping into a dream they feared would shatter. They looked at their father, seeing in his tear-streaked face the truth they desperately needed. He hadn't known. He would never have allowed it had he known. "Papa?" Eleanor's voice was small, uncertain. "Is it real? Is she really gone?" Henry dropped to his knees, arms opening wide. "She's really gone, and she's never coming back, and I am so sorry. Sorry for not seeing. Sorry for not knowing. Sorry for failing to protect you. Sorry for—" Every parent watching this knows the weight of those 3 words. I'm sorry. Sometimes the hardest thing we ever have to do is admit we failed those we love most. Henry was doing that now, without excuses, without deflection, just raw, honest acknowledgement. "We tried to tell you. Charles sobbed into his shoulder, his young voice breaking. We tried so many ways, but she always knew. She always stopped us. She said you'd never believe us anyway, that we were just children, that... I'm so proud of you, so proud. Don't go to Parliament any more, Anne whispered, her small hands fisting in his coat with desperate strength. Please, Papa, don't leave us again. What if she comes back? What if... Ministers can wait. Parliament can wait. You, all three of you, you're my priority now, my only priority. You are my kingdom. Eleanor pulled back just enough to look at her father's face, searching his eyes with the intensity of someone who needed absolute certainty. You promise? You really promise you believe us? That you won't change your mind when she tells you her side? There is no her side, Henry said firmly, cupping Eleanor's face in his hands. There is only truth and lies. You told truth. She told lies. End of story. I saw with my own eyes what she is. I read your letters. I know everything now, and nothing will ever make me doubt you again. We thought... Charles started, then stopped, struggling with words too big for his young heart. We thought maybe we deserved it. Maybe we were bad children. Maybe if we'd been better, she would have... And children deserve love, safety, protection, always. What she did to you was evil, pure evil, and the blame, all of it, falls on her. None of it, not one single drop, falls on you. Do you understand me? They nodded, tears still streaming, but something in their faces began to shift, the burden of false guilt carried for so long starting to lift. Say it, Henry urged gently. Say it wasn't our fault. It wasn't our fault. Eleanor whispered. Louder. It wasn't our fault, Charles said, his voice stronger. It wasn't our fault, Anne cried, the words bursting from her like birds freed from a cage. That's right. Henry pulled them close again. That's absolutely right. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never forget that. Making sure you're safe, making sure you know how precious you are, how loved, how irreplaceable. They stayed like that for a long time, a father and his children, healing together on the throne room floor. Outside, Margaret watched, her own tears flowing freely. She thought of the promise she'd made to Catherine, of the risk she'd taken. But looking at that reunited family, she knew she'd done right. Sometimes love requires betrayal of protocol. Sometimes protecting the innocent means risking everything. The following morning, Victoria departed Windsor Castle. No fanfare, no ceremony, just a plain carriage taking her back to obscurity. The court buzzed with scandal. Parliament was aghast. But Henry, for the first time in his reign, didn't care about politics or appearances. Let them talk, he told his advisers. My children are safe. That's what matters. That's all that matters. The weeks that followed became a period of restoration. Henry cancelled appointments, delegated responsibilities, cleared his schedule of everything but the most essential. He devoted himself entirely to his children, really seeing them, really listening, really being present. And Margaret, dear, brave Margaret, was no longer just a chambermaid. Henry promoted her to royal governess, gave her chambers in the family wing, increased her salary tenfold. But more importantly, he gave her a place of honor in their lives. Call her Grandmother Margaret, Henry told his children. She's family now, true family. The children needed little encouragement. Where Victoria had brought terror, Margaret brought comfort. Where Victoria inflicted wounds, Margaret applied healing. But healing was neither quick nor easy. The scars of trauma run deep, invisible but undeniable. Eleanor suffered nightmares for months, waking screaming that Victoria had returned, that the banishment was a dream, that the terror would start again. Henry would rush to her chambers in the middle of the night, holding her until the shaking stopped, whispering, "You're safe, you're safe, you're safe," like a prayer. Charles developed a stammer when nervous, his words tripping over the fear that still haunted him. During council meetings or formal dinners, he would freeze mid-sentence, face flushing with embarrassment. But Henry never rushed him, never showed impatience. He would simply wait, maintaining eye contact, communicating without words. "Take your time. You're safe. I'm listening." And would sometimes go entire days, barely speaking, retreating into silence when overwhelmed by memories. She would sit in corners, making herself small, as if trying to disappear. The same survival instinct that had served her under Victoria's reign, but no longer served any purpose except to break her father's heart. If you've ever loved someone struggling with trauma, you understand Henry's helplessness in these moments. You can't fix it with a hug. You can't erase it with apologies. You can only be present, patient, and persistent in showing them that safety is real and permanent. Henry learned patience he'd never needed before. He learned to read the signs of distress, Eleanor's rapid breathing before a panic attack, Charles's stuttering increasing when triggered, Anne's retreat into silence. He learned to recognize triggers, raised voices, closed doors, the sound of footsteps in certain corridors. He learned to provide comfort without demanding explanations, to sit beside a crying child without trying to fix everything immediately. He also learned to forgive himself, gradually releasing the crushing guilt that threatened to consume him. His children helped with that, their resilience and capacity for joy slowly returning as they realized safety was permanent, not temporary. They had good days and bad days. They had setbacks and breakthroughs, but the trajectory was clear, toward light, toward healing, toward life. "You didn't know, Papa," Eleanor told him one evening, 8 months after Victoria's exile. They sat in Catherine's gardens, now restored and beautiful, filled with the flowers his first wife had loved. Roses climbed trellises. Lavender swayed in gentle breezes. It was peaceful in a way the castle hadn't been for years. "You trusted her because you're good. That's not a weakness. That's who you are." "Your mother would say the same," Henry replied softly, pulling Eleanor close. His voice carried the weight of loss, but also gratitude for the wisdom Catherine had left behind. She always believed the best in people. She saw goodness everywhere. "Then we'll be like her," Charles added, joining them on the garden bench, his stammer absent in this moment of peace. "We'll be kind like Mama was. We'll believe in people. But we'll also be smart, like Margaret taught us to be. We'll watch, we'll listen, we'll protect others the way she protected us. We can be both kind and wise, trusting but not naive." Then, sitting at Henry's feet, braiding flower stems, a habit she'd developed during recovery, the repetitive motion soothing her anxiety, looked up with those wise eyes that seemed too old for such a young face. "Grandmother Margaret says trust is like a treasure," she recited, her child's voice carrying profound understanding. "You don't give it to everyone, but when you give it to the right people, it makes everyone rich. She says the trick is learning to tell the difference." Henry laughed, really laughed, for the first time in what felt like years. It was a sound of pure joy, untainted by political calculation or courtly restraint. It echoed across the gardens, startling birds into flight, and his children laughed with him. "Grandmother Margaret is very wise indeed, the wisest person I know." "Wiser than kings?" Anne asked, with the delightful literalness of childhood. "Wiser than 10 kings," Henry confirmed, "wiser than all the advisors and ministers and nobles combined. Because she understands what matters most, protecting innocence, speaking truth, choosing courage over comfort. That's wisdom no crown can teach." The castle itself seemed to exhale, releasing years of tension. Servants who had witnessed but felt powerless now spoke freely. Several came forward with observations confirming Margaret's testimony, adding pieces to the full picture of Victoria's cruelty. Henry listened to each person, thanked them, and made systemic changes. New protocols for reporting concerns, multiple check-ins with children from different staff members, open-door policies encouraging truth even when uncomfortable. He wouldn't allow blindness again, his own or anyone else's. Every one of us watching wishes we could create such safe spaces where truth is welcomed, where the vulnerable are protected, where courage is celebrated over comfort. Henry was building exactly that. As months turned to years, the family found its rhythm. Eleanor's music burst forth like flowers after winter. Charles discovered gifts for strategy and negotiation that surprised seasoned advisors. Anne became the family's heart, first to forgive mistakes, first to notice sadness, first to offer comfort. "They will be remarkable," Margaret told Henry one evening, watching the children play in gardens. "You've given them something more valuable than any crown." "What's that?" "Truth, safety, the knowledge that they matter more than politics or pride." Margaret smiled. "You've shown them that love means protection, not just affection." The Christmas of 1843, just over a year after Victoria's banishment, brought the family's transformation into sharp focus. Windsor glowed with thousands of candles, holly adorned every surface, and laughter echoed through halls silent for too long. At Christmas dinner, an intimate affair with just the four of them and Margaret, they gathered around a table laden with traditional foods. Henry raised his glass for a toast, but Charles cleared his throat. "Papa, may I?" At Henry's nod, Charles stood, his young face serious. "A year ago we were afraid, we were hurt, we thought we were alone, we believed no one would listen." Henry's throat tightened, but he remained silent. But Grandmother Margaret listened, and she helped Papa see the truth. And Papa, Charles's voice cracked with emotion, Papa chose us. Over everything else, he chose us. And now we're here, and we're safe, and we're happy, and I just want to pray. They bowed their heads as Charles continued. "Thank you, God, for sending Grandmother Margaret when we needed her most. Thank you for giving Papa courage to believe us and protect us. Thank you for casting evil from our home and bringing back love." His voice strengthened. "And thank you for teaching us that real family isn't perfect, but it's honest, it's safe, it's home." "Amen," Eleanor whispered, tears streaming. "Amen," Anne echoed, squeezing Margaret's hand. Henry couldn't speak past the lump in his throat. He simply nodded, reaching across to grasp each of his children's hands, completing the circle. In that moment, he understood something profound. His crown, the actual physical crown locked in the royal vault, encrusted with jewels representing centuries of power, that was just metal and stones. This circle of hands, this gathering of souls who had weathered darkness and emerged into light, this was his true crown. The years that followed proved the wisdom of those Christmas insights. Each child bloomed in their own way, watered by safety and truth. Eleanor discovered that music could heal not just herself, but others. She performed at state functions, yes, but more importantly, she taught music to children in orphanages and poorhouses. "Music saved me when I had no voice," she would say, her fingers dancing across piano keys as ragged children watched in wonder. "Now I give that gift forward." She eventually chose a kind scholar who saw her as Eleanor first, Princess second. Their wedding was filled with laughter and song, children from her music programs forming the choir. Henry walked her down the aisle with tears of joy, remembering the frightened girl who had knelt on cold stone and marveling at the strong woman she'd become. Charles became his father's closest advisor, but more than that, he became the voice for those without voices. He revolutionized how complaints against nobility were heard and investigated, ensuring that servants and commoners had access to courts previously closed to them. He personally reviewed every case involving children, his own experience making him uniquely qualified to spot the signs of abuse hidden behind fine words. "I know what it's like when power goes unchecked," he told Parliament during heated debates. "I know how easily cruelty hides behind respectability. Never again. Not on my watch, not while I draw breath." His reforms became known as the Margaret Laws, named for the woman who taught him that position doesn't determine worth. Anne, sweet Anne, who had been youngest and most vulnerable, devoted herself to charitable works with the fierce determination of someone who remembered helplessness and refused to let others suffer it. She founded hospitals and orphanages across England, but she didn't just fund them. She personally visited each facility monthly, refusing to let royal status create distance from those she served. She sat beside sickbeds. She held orphans who cried for mothers they'd lost. She listened, truly listened, to stories of suffering and survival. "Grandmother Margaret taught me," she explained to anyone who asked, "that the measure of a person isn't their title or their wealth, but their courage to do what's right when it's hard." She was a chambermaid who saved princes and princesses. "I'm a princess trying to save whoever I can." And Margaret herself. She lived another 15 glorious years, watching her beloved charges grow into remarkable adults who changed the kingdom for the better. She attended 3 royal weddings, her weathered hands held by brides and grooms who called her grandmother. She held numerous great-grandchildren, as they all called her, telling them stories of courage and kindness. She was honored with titles and positions, but she treasured most the handwritten letters from Eleanor, Charles, and Anne, letters that began, "Dear Grandmother," and ended, "With all our love." When she finally passed at 82, peacefully in her sleep with Eleanor's hand in hers, her state funeral drew thousands. Her simple coffin was carried not by servants, but by 3 princesses, a future king, and Henry himself, all of them weeping openly, unashamed of their tears. At her funeral, King Henry, now in his 50s, hair fully silver, gave the eulogy. This woman had no title, no position, no power in the traditional sense, but she had courage, moral clarity, the absolute conviction that protecting innocent children mattered more than protecting guilty queens. He paused, looking at the coffin. "Margaret saved my children. She saved my family. She saved Windsor Castle from becoming a place of darkness. And through her courage, she taught us all what true nobility looks like." Eleanor, Charles, and Anne, all now adults with families, wept openly. They had lived the truth. Henry spoke. As for Victoria, Catherine Blackwood, she lived out her days at Blackwood Manor in bitter obscurity. All attempts to spread counter-narratives failed. The evidence was too thorough, the witnesses too credible. She died alone at 63. Her obituary was brief, factual, offering no sympathy. Some lives, the absence of commentary speaks volumes. The story of Windsor Castle, 1842, became legend, taught in schools, referenced in Parliament. "Remember Margaret" became a phrase meaning speak up when children are in danger. But the most powerful legacy wasn't in history books. It was that 3 terrorized children grew into adults who knew they mattered, who knew they were believed, who knew they were protected. They passed that certainty to their children, creating cascading generations who understood that safety is not negotiable and truth is worth fighting for. On quiet evenings, when Windsor was still and moonlight painted marble silver, staff reported hearing music drifting through halls, Eleanor's piano or perhaps just wind. But those who knew understood better. It was the sound of a family healed. In Windsor's gardens, 3 trees grew in a private corner, oak for strength, willow for resilience, cherry for beauty. Planted in Margaret's honor, they stood as living testament. The greatest kingdoms are built not on power, but on courage and truth. Because in the end, the measure of a king is not the size of his army or the grandeur of his palace. It's the safety of his children, the truth in his words, the justice in his actions. And the love, fierce, protective, unshakable love, that drives him to stand against evil even when that evil wears a crown. If this story has moved you, has reminded you that courage comes in all forms, from desperate children writing hidden letters to elderly maids risking everything to fathers finally choosing to see, Then let us know in the comments what city and country you're watching from. Leave your like so we can keep sharing stories that remind us all. Justice is possible, healing is real, and love is the most powerful force in any kingdom. Because sometimes the most important revolutions happen not on battlefields but in private chambers. Sometimes the greatest victories are won not with swords but with truth. And sometimes the most powerful crown a person can wear is the courage to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Thank you for being part of this community that believes in stories of justice, redemption, and hope. Together, we're proving that truth still matters, that the vulnerable deserve protection, and that it's never too late to choose what's right over what's convenient. May we all have the courage, when our moment comes, to stand up for the innocent, no matter the cost.